Yay, welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Drinking Movement podcast. I have an amazing guest again today. It's Amy Babish. If you haven't heard the first installment of our podcast series, it's the one just prior to this. So please give that a listen if you haven't heard it already. So Amy is a guide and she helps her clients work through complications or issues that they may understand, but they haven't been able to move through using soul and ancestral level healing and therapy modalities. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Jess. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited for part two.
Yes, totally. Amy and I were kind of going off on a tangent just prior to this, and we are like, we just need to hit record and get this down.
100%,
Yeah.
100%.
So thank you for tuning in and listening. And today we're going to be, and as in a continuation of the conversation from last time, if you haven't listened to it, I'll just briefly recap. We were discussing the importance of using somatic healing to help a person who's ready for more healing, but can't embrace these kind of more esoteric or like spirituality based practices using one's own soul and one's own energy if he or she is out of body, so to speak. So we were talking about using somatic practices to help a person feel safe back in their body, to come back home into the body, because that is where transformation happens when the soul is fully intact and inside the body. That was most of what we spoke about. And I think we went off on some circular patterns there. But to get to this point where we're going to have a conversation around soul assignments. And I asked Amy specifically to come on here because she has a wealth of information around soul assignments. I'm a bit of a novice still in that language and in that understanding, but in my work specifically, as I work with addiction, most um, notably for alcohol use, I've really been thinking about how alcohol use is not an accident in someone's life. It's not something that is just a shitty experience. Like there's a deeper meaning and significance to a person's existence when they are living through an addiction. So whether they're still in the throes of addiction or they're contemplating how they can get out or they're on the other side of it, I find it much more helpful to think about the addiction journey as something that is happening on a greater scale than that's just happening right now in your human life in this moment. And so I'm going to ask Amy, I phonetically said your name because I read it as I said it. I'm going to ask Amy to elaborate on how the addiction journey is actually part of the soul's journey and how understanding at it or looking at it through this lens can be really helpful. Would you like to take it from there, Amy?
Yes, yes, I'll dive in.
Okay, awesome.
So I think it's important to preference that anything that I share is not to tell somebody that's listening what the truth is or what to believe. These are the words are ways in.
Mhm.
This is a way in. So from my lineage, from my come from place, from my train, from all the wisdom traditions that I'm trained in, um, when we choose to incarnate, we are coming with our soul's curriculum. And so sometimes some of us are new souls. It's like, oh, this is our first time. My experience with addiction, usually that's not a first time assignment.
Mhm.
And it is like, this is the door through which I am going to alchemize and learn deeply my path as a soul. And we oftentimes choose many different parts of our curriculum. We don't just choose one assignment. And um, that comes from our past lives. We might have tried to work through the essence or the medicine or the aha of this specific lesson for us through other lifetimes. And because of our soul's wisdom, we notice that this seems like this is the best way for us to learn in this lifetime, which might be addiction. And that
Can I
is
pause you?
yes, 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 yes.
What might be some examples of some lessons that addiction is trying to teach or to have the soul understand more deeply?
Uh, in my experience, I've worked with a lot of people who've gone through addiction processes with me, addiction soul journeys.
Mm.
Um, I think one of the biggest ones is love. That
Mm.
um, the that the soul or the person is not separate from love, and that they are worthy of love no matter what they've done, no matter who they've been, and no matter what they've chosen. And that can be incredibly humbling. It can be very potent, and it can change things backwards and forwards in time in incredible ways. That would be the first one. A nuance of that, but it's still related, is worthiness.
Mhm.
Worthiness comes up a lot with clients
A lot.
around the soul curriculum piece. Another one, which might seem like a surprise, but for people who are, this is not everyone who has an addiction, but for some people who have addiction, it's that they are not their emotions,
Mm.
and they are not the emotions of the system. It could be the family system, it could be the um, system of racism or oppression. Um, they're not the pain of the system, they're not the grief of the system, they're not the rage of the system. And sometimes when people choose a curriculum of addiction, they are learning that emotions are just waves, and that they can be um, solid and safe,
Mhm.
just like the tide coming in and out
Mhm.
with themselves and with other people who might carry big emotions,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that those things are not disconnection.
Totally not. And what you're saying is a really solution oriented um, method that when people really understand that they're not their emotions, because feeling like you are your emotion makes you feel like you have to get away from it because it's terrifying at times, the intensity, especially deep grief or deep anger, sadness, to not be able to hold that in the body. And the brain kind of has this story of like, oh, this is forever. And like, I'm going insane. And like, you've got to do something to get out of the body, to get out of that experience. But when people can learn to sit with that intensity and not hold it so tightly, it does move through like a wave, and it is so, it's like almost exquisite, right, to come through the other side of these really intense emotions and not having done anything necessarily to turn it off other than just experience it and be with it. When that, it's almost like a skill that we should know but we were never taught. Like turn your emotions off is more what we are, what we're imprinted with from the beginning. We're too much for people, can't be that way, don't do that. And so we learn that okay, our emotions are bad or wrong, or that there's something wrong with me, and then to unlearn that and rather have the emotions, like an understanding of emotions like weather, right, that moves through, or waves, I love that as well. um, you realize that you are more you, like you're really just you, and these things are natural phenomenon that are happening through you. And I find like when I work with clients, I really help, or I strive to help people be able to just stay with themselves long enough to allow this to pass. And then when it does pass, the impulse to go buy the wine or drink the wine or the beer, or light a joint or whatever, is really, it's like, it's so much more greatly diminished. So I love what you're saying, how that is a path of understanding, that the soul goes on to understand that, oh, this isn't me. This is like an experience that I am having, or that is moving through me. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of
Yeah.
piggyback on what you were saying, because I think it's so helpful for people to, if your mind can rationalize like, okay, this is just going to be temporary. I can hang for a minute. Like I can hang this out 15 minutes. I have people set a timer often when they're feeling compelled to drink because of anger, what have you, a lesser vibratory emotion, and to just like watch the timer and like do something else for 20 minutes. And maybe you have your drink after 20 minutes, but like at least you're not drinking in response to this impulse of feeling so overwhelmed. It does pass. Yeah, just a really important thing to understand in a deep level, or to how embody the experience of being able to do that. Yeah.
And I would just add, like, many people can use somatic work or the method you're speaking about, like with just setting the timer. And for those people who are listening who are like, I've tried those things and I still have this like tsunami level of emotion that comes through and I just need to numb it. That is when it goes into, it can be the soul level assignment, and it kind of dovetails into, this is something where we have to work with ancestors usually,
Mm,
because it's not that you are this unique snowflake that has like tsunami level emotions. It's that you're carrying the unresolved patterns of
mhm,
ancestors, and the
mhm,
ancestors can be soul level, like past lives, or they can be blood. So
mhm.
when something feels really impossible or immovable, you've kind of thrown everything at the spaghetti at the wall. Like, you've tried all these modalities and it's still not shifting for you. That is when ancestral work can be immensely helpful.
Mhm. Which is perfect transition into the next topic that I wanted to talk about. Could you tell us more about that and how we carry, or our soul assignment carries the, I don't know, I want to say necessarily the weight, but the like the imprint or the energy of things that our ancestors were trying to heal for themselves, and how that is present with us.
Yes, yes, yes. So I think probably many of your listeners know about epigenetics. And so epigenetics is the science of understanding that, um, in essence, our ancestors are living in our DNA. And it's not just our physical traits, like, are you prone to diabetes, or are you prone to neurospiciness? Like, it's
Mhm.
everything. It's everything. And epigenetics has, like, the science of epigenetics has not gotten into what we're going to talk about with ancestry work, but we have, sometimes science lags with what it's going to be able to document.
Mm,
So to give a framework for this for people that are more linear based, that is a reference point for people to understand where this conversation kind of, all the roads are kind of leading to helping us understand this. So we have the soul lineage, and if you're a new soul, an old soul, you're choosing the blood lineage you want to come into in this lifetime. And that
yeah.
might really challenge some people's belief systems. So you could just kind of
I
put
believe
that,
it, but if you don't agree, just
just
suspend
keep,
disbelief for a minute.
yeah, keep it moving. So,
Yeah.
so when we have our blood lineage, we carry both the gifts and the challenges of the ancestors. And we don't carry all of them. We carry all of them, but we don't, the specific things that are related to our soul level assignments are ours.
Mhm.
So when it comes to, I'm going to just use addiction because that will help it be a bit more concrete for those tuning in deeply. You could use the example of whatever the cultural or bigger context of the era was in a family system, in a blood lineage, which could be famine, which could be poverty, which could be war, which could be genocide, whatever that dynamic was that was just too much to bear. If we kind of say life was, we were bearing it, we were surviving that in your lineage, however far back that was, and most of us have that in our lineage.
Mhm, mhm,
And we're going to give the example of, in a family system, this might be someone's great great or great 3 levels back grandparents, right? So during this era, the great 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 grandparents had kids out of love, and they said, we're going to just survive this cultural phenomenon. It's going to be hard, but we still want to have kids. And maybe it wasn't choice. We don't have to get into that specificity for this conversation. And at some point, let's say grandpa loses his job, and that brings so much scarcity and so much shame to the family. He just starts drinking, and grandma's like, the times are hard. I can't deal with this. I got to make ends meet. I can't handle you being in the home like this. And she kicks him out. And he is ostracized from the family and in some ways almost obliterated or forgotten. So then intergenerationally through the generations, it might not show up as addiction in every single generation going forward, but it will be carried as not belonging.
Mm.
That this person that feels like a failure, was in reality, this was out of his control because of the times, because of the culture, because of whatever the power structure was in that specific culture that your family is from. When it comes to the current day person in that lineage who might be struggling with addiction, it's as if great 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 grandfather is here saying, my pain matters.
Mm.
Not belonging, I can't bear to not belong anymore. And for the person who's struggling with addiction, it might look like, I keep on attracting someone who only sees like all the things I'm doing wrong when I'm contributing in all these other ways. Or
Mhm.
it might be that they have lose friendships over this, or it just might be this repetition of not belonging with addiction.
Mhm.
And so the ancestral work would be, working with somebody that can help facilitate the constellation process is super helpful for this family systems constellation, to use the formal word for it.
Mhm.
Um, it might be that in this process, the constellation is set up so that there are representatives for great 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 grandmother and great 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 grandfather, where great 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 grandmother can acknowledge, you gave us this gift of all these kids, and that was a gift. And yes, that doesn't diminish the hardship that was caused by the addiction, and it's more whole. And the client who is asking for that constellation is here today because of grandpa,
Mm.
not just because of the addiction, but because he gave life to her great great grandmother or grandfather.
Mm.
And so that it's the wholeness and the healing of the entire lineage
Mm.
around belonging and not belonging that happens to come through addiction. That on the
Mhm.
surface, Western culture would say, just stop drinking, or take some medicine to stop drinking, or
That never works.
do
That never
do
works.
some do some mindset work. Do some mindset work. And it's like this is
Got
very,
some
very
Post-it notes and put them on the mirror.
right. Like this is like quite complex and quite nuanced for many people.
Mhm.
And addiction is is can be so painful in family systems. And it usually has that, the split, the rupture.
Mhm.
The family system is takes a big hit for all the belonging, not belonging, belonging, not belonging.
Totally. That was a really wonderful example and illustration to kind of like lead us through as like this is an example of what that might look like. Very specifically, specifics are important so our mind can follow the story. And while you were talking, it just made me think like addiction's kind of like a knocking on the door of
Hmm.
like I'm here as an ancestral an ancestor who's seeking this kind of healing or like needing wanting something. If you find yourself as someone who is living with addiction, it can be like there's this knocking on the door. Your experience is an ancestor trying to get your attention. Could be. For example, like I think that this is much more interesting to speak about addiction this way
Hmm.
than you just, you like alcohol and it lights you up, so you just keep doing it, and you're born with some defect that this is a perfect match for. That's not ever going to be helpful to anybody, I don't think. Then someone just thinks that something's wrong with them forever. So um, I think that looking at addiction this way is through like this is almost like a portal, like I've
Yes.
chosen to look at my addiction as I've moved through these different levels of it. It was like a portal that I stepped through. And I made an episode that I was last Thanksgiving that I was grateful to my addiction. because without it, it wouldn't have shown me, I wouldn't have been able to see or perceive or like experience these other levels of self or a deeper knowing of myself if it had just been complacent and fine and everything was great. Like we almost need rupture and discomfort and these places where we can put ourselves up against these edges of like, well, what does this really mean? Like, why am I having this experience? Why why me? Why this lifetime? And it's almost like, well, it's an invitation and you can, or a knocking at the door and you can answer it or not. But maybe if you don't, then maybe your daughter will be the one, or for example, possibly, Um, yeah, I so can you so the family constellations is a great example, but how else might someone who's just beginning to do ancestral work, how might they begin some sort of practice or experience in connecting with the ancestors?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So intention is everything. When you work with ancestors, when you do personal work, when you want to be on a transformational journey. So I would recommend as a first step that you set the intention of, I want to understand the ancestors who are living through me around my addiction.
Mm. Say it one more time for people in the back.
In the back, it's like it helps for it to really bubble up. And so what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling for this community that's listening, and whenever people find this podcast, my intention is to work with my ancestors who are living in me and through me around my addiction.
Mhm, mhm.
And it can't be like a transactional, like, I want to talk with you so you can help me. It's like
Yeah.
it has to be like I'm willing to knock at the door every day and really wait for you to come through.
Mhm,
And another kind of helpful way to feel into this, so you set the intention, and then anytime you're going for a drink or using the substance, the thoughts that you're having leading up to that are really the ancestors' words. So instead
mhm,
of like, I want to pick up this drink, it's like some ancestor in that's living in me wants to pick up a drink right after I had this fight or right after I got promoted. Right? Like it's like something's happening that
mhm.
feels like it's your life and
Right.
it is the ancestors. It's like a Venn diagram of their life, your life, their life, your life.
Mhm,
And so that's another way you can just start to make notes. So
mhm,
the journaling can be a bit more like opening of the portal, as you would say.
mhm.
A third way would be what we call, it's called objects constellation work. And so you can have representatives. And so we just start with a very, very simple constellation. So you would, I'll just grab some crystals
Yeah,
from my
please do.
windowsill. Okay. So you always start with an intention. So you set the intention. And then I recommend to clients that they make a note of something. So then when they come back to it, because this is something you're going to come back to, you know which representative represents what. So
Mhm,
the first object we start with is always ourselves in this process. So
mhm,
you would take the object. So this is red carnelian, it's for the heart. That's intentionally for this will transmission will come through for all the listeners. So you hold that object and you hold the intention and you say, now you represent me. And so then I place it over here in some place where there's an open space. So I have part of my desk, it doesn't have anything on it. So I place that down and then I pick up the next one. And so the next one is going to be this object. And so I'm going to hold it and I'm going to say, you now represent my intention. You
mhm,
represent my intention of inviting in the ancestors that live in me around this addiction. So then I place it down and I kind of just feel in my body, like I might kind of move my hand around, like how close or how far away from that object that represents me, where is it in relationship to me in this on this kind of field or the surface. Then the third one is going to be my ancestors. So I say, you now represent my ancestors. And I just thank them and then I put them down. And again, I kind of feel where they're going to go in relationship to everybody else on the field. And so I put them down and then I just take a deep breath and I feel if there's anything coming through, any bodily sensations, any change in my temperature, my breath, any kind of constriction, um, anything like I might smell something different, I might hear something. It's all connected, and then I just make a note of it.
Mhm.
And if you're able to keep it out, that's wonderful. If it's something where you live in an environment where you can't keep something out all the time because of kids or because you need privacy, that's okay. Just make a note on a notepad of what it looks like. And then the next day when you come back to it, doesn't have to be the next day, but when you come back to it the next time, just pick up one object. It doesn't have to, oh, I feel more drawn to the intention stone. Let me hold that and just breathe into it and notice if anything comes up. And then when I want to put it back, does it want to be someplace different? And then I ask, do the other objects want to be someplace different? And this is a way to start to get into the ancestral field. It's a very
Mm.
gentle process, um, and it will progress. And then it might come to a place of needing some other support. And so the other support is usually when I recommend that people work with someone who knows how to do this work.
Yeah.
But as a first layer, you could do this. Some people do it daily after their morning practice. Some people do it like the first of the month, something like on a cadence or ritual. Some people
Mhm.
do new moon, full moon. It's you're having gentle contact in a way that um, doesn't have to be like a fire hose, like too much too soon or all at once. Like
Mhm.
we want to titrate and pace with this, um, so that it's not overwhelming.
That's beautiful and sounds really fun as well.
Yes, it is. It can be really fun. Yes.
Totally. I think I'm gonna do that for myself as well. Awesome. These are really great, applicable things that people can just do like today. If
Yep.
you're becoming someone who's more interested or already is aware of ancestral medicine and working with the ancestors. Um, I think it's so interesting. I've had quite a few clients who, when they're in hypnosis, will almost channel an ancestor, or sometimes it's been a past life. Like there's definitely past life regression in hypnosis, but they'll almost, I've had like a couple of people I'm thinking of quite clearly started speaking as a person from the past. Like
Hmm.
their language, their vocabulary changed, and it was really interesting to work through. Like I'm always speaking to the client, right? I am in my practice. I don't switch and then speak to the great grandma. That's definitely a modality that can happen. But when I ask the client when they're in this mode, and sometimes they're aware that they're um, channeling this presence or this presence is speaking through them. I don't want to like freak people. It's not necessarily channeling, but it is something or some energy that is speaking through the person. And they talk about this pain or this experience, a memory, a trauma that the client is not cognizant of. And I just think it's so powerful, right? It's so powerful. And when you address um, what is it that is wanted, right? What do you need to have happen? What would you like to what would you like to see? What would you like to have done, right? And then like this answer will come that didn't even make any sense to the person. Something strange, like plant sunflowers in front of this house or something. Or I had a client that kept having miscarriages, and like this messaging came through her that she needed to bury, not a placenta, but I forget what exactly it was, but she had to like create this burial for the baby that she'd lost before she could get pregnant again. And she did this like these rituals. It's ritual, really, is what it is. It's this act of something coming through the body that then energy can be released or transformed. And it's amazing. It's so powerful. And what you're speaking of is ritualistic in a way too. It's like and that's why, okay, I think drinking, I almost want to write a book about the positive intention of alcohol. And a lot of it is ritual. It's this ritual of being with people, of being in community, of sharing something, breaking bread. It's like another translation of breaking bread, like opening a bottle, sharing wine, passing a beer around. It bonds people. And to bring it back to what you were saying earlier about the example of the great grandpa who felt ostracized and didn't belong,
Mhm.
it's almost this way to feel belonging, to be with people. And I think that that's my theory is that that's why a lot of addiction feels so strong. It's like we just, there's this deep need that goes back for forever for us to feel like we belong and we're accepted. And alcohol, for all its faults and problems, has done it's done an amazing job of that. Like we do need better rituals, we need healthier alternatives because we don't want to die from our rituals. But do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I think that that is the positive intention of alcohol and addiction, is that it's like this thing that's trying to be accepted and belong and bond.
A 1000%. And from constellation work, belonging isn't about ethics or morals.
No,
It's
it is not.
it's about it's about survival. And
Yes.
so then when someone goes to say, I'm going to modify, if someone was a heavy drinker or had an addiction, when they then choose to shift their drinking habits, the group where they felt belonging might have a lot of feelings about not belonging when they choose differently.
Hmm.
And so on the surface, the people who are concerned about the person's addictions are like, we're so proud of you. This should be so great and so easy. But it is another portal of navigating that soul curriculum of how do I safely belong
Hmm.
and not always look for not belonging,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So it's like it's very cyclical. And when it comes to the ritual part in constellation work, we talk about what's the forward movement. What's the forward movement after we resolve this piece that was separate or not belong or omitted? What is the forward movement that will bring this into wholeness?
Hmm.
And so ritual is very much a part of it. And it's oftentimes like doesn't seem like logically or common sense wise like it would make sense, but the forward movement is it's a healing movement. And oftentimes healing movements deal with ritual.
Hmm. 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 I there's a shaman that I follow, Alberto Bioldo. Have you heard of him?
No, mm-mm.
He talks about how ritual is really the only way that our mind and our body and our spirit can accept a rite of passage, like with birth, weddings, birthdays, blowing out of candles, um, death ceremonies. Like we don't accept and move through until we have a ritual around a specific rite of passage. It's the only way it's accepted on these three different levels, because you're physically doing something. You can intellectualize that something has happened that's massive or transitional or very important, and your soul is connecting with the energy of the intention of this ritual. Maybe our podcast is called Rituals.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Yeah.
I, when you were speaking, I saw something so cute. It was like a little drawing that a kid made, an Irish kid, and it said, "When we encounter a ghost, or when we see a ghost, we are taught to ask it what it needs."
Mhm.
And I was like, in Ireland, of course, they're beautiful, but yeah, it's not to be feared.
Right.
Like there are definitely malicious energies, but I feel like my belief is that everything is really a cry for love, a cry for acceptance, a cry for help, and these things can feel scary because it's like looking at these shadow parts of ourselves that are surfacing when you get into this work, or when you minimize or remove alcohol, for example. It does not create utopia. This is where the work is. When you take
Yeah.
that thing off, when you take the passive, not take it away. I don't really like that kind of language. It makes me feel like you're taking something from a baby. When you trade in a pacifier for a pen, for example, let's say, when you trade in some wine for deep breathing, when you trade in habitual alcohol use or addictive patterns for learning how to sit and be, or picking up some other kind of tool, that's really when the real work is coming, right? I think a lot of people have the idea that it's giving up alcohol or removing it or modifying it in some way, that that's the difficulty, but that's actually the stepping stone. That's really when you've just stood up and raised your hand, or said, yes, I accept this mission, or I'm going to be allow myself to be um, the person of my lineage, for example, who's going to have this experience in favor of those who have gone before and those who will come after. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this is when people will call it like the heroine's journey or the hero's journey. That is the soul's journey.
Hmm.
It's like I am ready to step out of everything I've known because I know something more is there's something more, but I have to risk everything I've known.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
everything I've known oftentimes is everything my ancestors have known,
Hmm.
everything my
Hmm.
soul has known.
And everything known is just the more of the familiar,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
At some point, just something, it doesn't have to be radical either, right? It doesn't have
Mm.
to be this big, dynamic, crazy thing. It's often just this like subtle shift in your thinking, or the way that you're experiencing yourself, or the way that you've connected with an energy that's greater than you, or with an ancestral lineage or energy that wants to move through. It's like a shift of intention, as you were saying. When we shift our intention about what it is that we want to experience in life, or what's important to us, or kind of re-evaluating the hierarchy of values that we want to live with, those are those are the moments, right? It's not like, all right, get divorced and get a 25-year-old boyfriend and like everything's great. It's like, no. it's
Yeah.
it's much more subtle than that. And when we do shift our internal state, that is when the 3D reality reflects back what we want to experience or be a stand for. I remember, this is totally not related to drinking or anything, but like I dated some wild nutcrackers like until I met my husband. I kept dating the same guy, right? And this happens in the cyclical patterns of any kind of behavior, right? You take alcohol away, but you don't remedy the cause of why you have an addictive pattern. Now you're smoking cigarettes. Okay, I'll put cigarettes down, but now I'm eating a bag of M&Ms every hour. It's like the same thing with a different face. So I was just dating the same guy with a different face. And I did some ritual work and shifting of my intention about what I really wanted and what I was available for, simultaneously upgrading my standards for myself and what I would accept for me. And very, very quickly, I was interacting with um, a world that was like, well, here is your moment to walk through this threshold. You want to stay on this side of the door, or are you going to embody the intention that you have set for yourself and walk through the threshold? And I did walk through the threshold by not going back to this other person I was dating, for example. I was like, no, I'm going to stand up for myself. And this happens, you can do this with anything, right? When you choose you and you stand up for yourself and you get yourself in alignment within its really strong intention that feels positive and authentic and true to your soul's assignment, your soul's journey, then you get to walk through the threshold, which can feel a little bit scary because on the other side of the threshold is not the known. It's not what's familiar, because then you're just repeating the pattern. It's moving into more of the mystery and like trusting that life is mysterious. And when you live more in the mystery, you actually feel more alive. It's like a paradox, but it's fun, scary, exciting, and available for everyone in whatever anybody is working through. And I really want to reaffirm to you who are listening, you don't need anything to do this, right? There's nothing missing ever. It's just a moment of decision that shifting your intention, shifting your alignment, working with your own energy, sitting through, riding the waves of emotion, allowing things to unfold for you and through you. And yeah, so if you are listening and you're excited by this conversation, I will just let you know that you're ready and you don't need to wait for anything else.
And I would just add like additional resources, like when you have the contact with your blood or soul ancestors and you ask them for help, they come through that threshold with you. So you're not
Mm.
alone. So it might
Mhm.
seem like I don't know, I can't see the next step out here other than stepping
Mhm.
through the threshold. You're doing it very differently by allowing them to help you.
That was a beautiful add-on. Yes, and thank you. That's important. Yeah, you're not alone. We're never alone. We feel so alone. We're so culturally conditioned to believe that we're alone, but we are not. Oh my gosh, I had the most amazing vision the other night. I was connecting myself with my lineage, just with my intention. And when you're falling asleep and there's this transitional world that you kind of go through from being awake to being in the dream state. And I had this a beautiful visual of all 360 degrees around me where it was like light beings, and they went back really far in each direction, like a mirror. Like it was infinite and it was so cool. And it just turned me on, like, I must say. It made me really happy.
Yeah.
I felt not alone. I felt held by this circular formation of beings that went back in infinite layers all around. And then I went to sleep and I don't know, I dreamed of it.
When I work with clients, I always say to them, like, I acknowledge the 10,000 that came before you that are with you.
Mm, mm, mm. So amazing. And forward.
Yep.
Um, I heard
Yes.
this really amazing Native American scholar speak. Gosh, his name is eluding me. If I recall it, I'll put it in the notes. Eduardo Duran. And he spoke about the 7 generations forward and backward.
Mhm.
And because time is not linear, but we make it so with our clocks and our calendars, but that time is infinite and it exists in this moment. And when we heal in this moment, we are healing at least 7 generations back and at least 7 generations into the future, or for whatever the future is. Yeah. Whatever will exist 7 generations forward. Yeah. Any kind of clothing or wrapping Christmas present, pearls of wisdom you'd like to pass on, or Hanukkah?
Seasonal. Uh,
Seasonal.
I think that an important thing that's coming through is like, it's never too late to begin,
Uh-huh.
and you're not doing it wrong if you've tried things and it's not working.
Mhm.
It's really like part of that. It's part of what a soul curriculum is oftentimes humility. That yes, we are
Mm.
this limitless soul, and there's so much more in the mystery. So carrying that humility allows us to have the bandwidth for our humanity and for others. That there other people's struggles might not be addiction, it might be something else.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it's like really, really sitting with surrender around it, not like in a traditional surrender way, but it's like I am willing to receive help on this in a way that might surprise me or might be very unexpected.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we should let go of the agenda most of the time.
yeah.
Yeah, and allow things to come to us. I think it's just so true, when you give permission for some doorway or pathway to be opened to you, that it will and it does, and also that we're not in control of the timeline either.
And this time of the year, the winter, and if someone finds this in a different hemisphere, the winter is the time of going within. It's the
Mhm.
time of being connected to our kidneys and our bladder.
Mm.
And the kidneys hold, in Chinese medicine, they hold our destiny, fate, ancestry, right size risk, like not staying so closed, nothing can change, and not being so haphazard, like it's risky, it's actually risky. And what we get when we cultivate that deep kind of going into like the wintering underneath the ground or in the cave is the virtue of faith. So it's like I can carry the faith when I've been in the cave, when I'm ready to step out of as life as I knew it. I have the faith that I will be supported. I have the faith that the next step will be clear. So this
Mhm.
time of year is so potent to align with that energy
Mhm.
and the cyclical nature of being here on earth. So it's the
Mhm.
perfect time of year to do this.
Perfect time of year to work with your roots.
Yes, yes. And the cosmic energy, both
Mm,
and. So the kidneys are associated with the heavenly sky and the cosmos. So it's like we're bringing down the heavens into our kidneys to nourish our kidneys,
ooh,
to nourish our destiny.
ooh, I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's like the navy blue, black sky with all the sparkles. Like imagine that coming through your body as you do these practices. And it's just like I am being deeply nourished as I take these brave steps and have this
Mm,
inquiry, hold this contemplation.
mm. Oh, so beautiful. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy, for being here.
Thank you so
Tell
much.
us where we can find you on the socials and things,
So
and
you can
I'll
find me
put
on
links.
my podcast, which is called The Soulful Visionary, and I have guests who do personal work with me. It's a session. It's a little bit different kind of podcast. So I do all the different modalities that I offer, and I have my newsletter and my website, and I'm on Instagram.
Awesome. Under Amy Babish. And
Yes,
do you take volunteers, or if someone was interested, how might they be a guest on your podcast?
yes. So I take at this time, at this iteration of the podcast, you can just email me.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. And is your email found through your Instagram?
Yep, and it's also on my website, and I have lots of like contact me hyperlinks throughout everything. So
Yeah, of course.
it's pretty easy to find me, pretty easy to
Okay,
connect with me.
cool. Well, please go find Amy Babish and listen to her podcast and give her a follow on Instagram. And it's been so great having you again. I've just loved it. And I look forward to connecting with you again, Amy.
Likewise, thank you so much.
My pleasure. And we will see you next week.